Hello, good morning. Welcome to the third day of the Oslo Freedom Forum. Today we have an amazing panel on the challenge that Venezuela has posed to the issue of democratic solidarity in Latin America. Rules, ground rules. Let me start by saying that I'm not a professional moderator, as opposed to yesterday we had Margaret Hoover moderating the panel on philanthropy. The day before, we had a professional debate moderated by John Donovan. But I'm a quick learner, so I paid attention. And I think the key of the game to moderate is, so we're going to have 5 to 6 minutes to do introductory remarks. And I'm, as moderator, I'm going to have the privilege to interrupt you, everyone. After 6 minutes, if you exceed it too much. And then we'll go for a round of dialogue type questions, and then we'll open it up towards the end for a Q&A from the public. In terms of language, this is going to be, as the conference in general, in English. So whoever needs translation from English to Spanish should get one of the headphones, the translation headphones. You can raise your hands exactly so that they give you one. And then one panelist, Senator José Matarí from Spain, will be speaking in Spanish. So for those that will then need translation from Spanish to English, I recommend you start getting your headphones now. My colleague Emilia there is handing them out.
Getting their Spanish lessons.
What's that?
Or to get their Spanish lessons accelerated.
Exactly, or to get their Spanish lessons. All right, so we'll start with,
Should we check the mic?
I'll introduce them one by one as they are about to speak. So I'll start with Tomás Pascual Ricke, Ambassador Tomás Pascual Ricke. He's the Director for Human Rights at the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Chile. As you know, the government of Chile is a government of the center-left. It's a center-left democratic government that was elected there. As you know, the dictatorship in place in Venezuela is a dictatorship like any other dictatorship. They don't have ideology, but they are perceived by a wide, by the wider public. They're perceived to be a left-wing dictatorship. So as a result, some of the, in our experience at HRF, perhaps the most important thing when you are fighting dictatorship is not just to get the intuitive. Against a right-wing dictatorship, you get the support from the left around the world, whether democratic or not, or against a left-wing dictator, you get support from the right already, whether democratic or not. The really difficult, courageous thing is to be a government that is perceived to be on the left, that has friends among maybe not too savory characters of the left. In the case of the government of Chile, part of their coalition is the Communist Party of Chile. And yet the Democratic president of Chile has shown an incredible determination in being very firm about the issue of dictatorship in Chile. And one of the people behind, in Venezuela. And yeah, exactly. Chile, not anymore, but yeah. And one of the people, the very courageous people behind that policy is obviously Ambassador Tomás Pascual here, and we're very honored to have him here. And he'll present about the challenges that being expressing solidarity with Venezuela has posed for his government and his country.
Thank you, Javier. Yeah, a dictatorship is a dictatorship no matter what part of the political spectrum, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is something that President Boric, as you said, has been very clear in stating out, no matter what. So first of all, let me thank the Oslo Freedom Forum for inviting me, or to minister in first place, and then me to participate in this wonderful event. I congratulate you on the organization and the effort to mobilize people from so many different places around the same aspiration, the defense of civil and political rights, the defense of human rights in such hostile context as the ones we live in today. And I take the opportunity, and as a government institution and human rights defenders, we cannot let the atrocities that surround us today pass us by. No? So our thoughts also go out to those suffering in Gaza, Ukraine, Nicaragua, and so many other places. Barbarism must end, and this is a good place to remember that. So today I will speak about democratic solidarity in Latin America, focusing on the well-known situation currently faced by Venezuela. I will begin by highlighting an example of what we might call an effective experience of Latin American solidarity. Then I will address the paradox that we face today, despite having a much stronger international framework than in the 60s or 80s, and living in an increasingly globalized world. International solidarity, resistance, and pressure often fail to achieve their intended effect. Instead, efforts to promote democratic regimes can sometimes end up harming the citizens of the countries involved, an outcome reflected in diplomatic decisions that are unprecedented in our time. Solidarity in Latin America has historically played a crucial role in resisting authoritarian regime. It has often emerged through social and transnational movements that seek the recognition of rights, the defense of territories, and resistance to various forms of colonial domination. One of the clearest examples, and you can see behind, of this regional solidarity was during the dictatorship in Chile. It is understood that the circumstances experienced under Pinochet led to a significant number of Chileans seeking refuge elsewhere. Across Latin America, countries welcomed these exiles with open arms. Thus, solidarity extends beyond words to what's reflected in concrete actions, such as sheltering victims and mobilizing support. We have some art exposing. This is called Afiches de la Solidaridad from Panama, Venezuela. Venezuela, the black one. Also Mexico, and I don't know, maybe Panama, Mexico, Venezuela. Today we are fortunate to have a few examples of this story-preserving posters and artworks that document how different countries welcome Chilean exiles. These visuals may perhaps evoke the image of a transnational campaign of resistance against the dictatorship, an organized effort to denounce the regime's crimes, mobilize international solidarity, and support the eventual return to democracy in Chile. The Chilean experience can shed some light and hope on what is happening in Venezuela today, despite the fact that the efforts to bring democracy back to that country have so far been unsuccessful. We will reflect on this. Despite significant international pressure and the effort of many Latin American governments, the Venezuelan regimes remain entrenched. Countries in the region have responded generously on an humanitarian level, granting Venezuelan migrants temporary residence, refugee status, or special protection permissions. However, while these measures provide vital support to displaced individuals, they have not translated into substantial improvements in Venezuela's democratic conditions. Diplomatic efforts have been numerous, including Chile's active participation alongside other regional countries in the presentation of the UN resolution titled Situation of Human Rights in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. This resolution expressed deep concern about the ongoing and systematic deterioration of human rights in this country. During the last session of the Human Rights Council in March 2025, an interactive dialogue took place with the independent international fact-finding mission in Venezuela. During this meeting, Chile emphasized that in the aftermath of the electoral repression, more than 2,500 individuals were detained for their opposition to the government. It has also been asserted that systematic and coordinated repression is taking place, with instances of short-term enforced disappearance, which significantly exacerbate the gravity of these human rights violations. If I may, I would also like to briefly mention the diplomatic tensions, as you see, that have arisen from this situation. Following the election, Chile maintained a consistent and firm stance against the Venezuela regime, starting from President Boric, which culminated in the expulsion of Chilean diplomatic and consular missions from Venezuela. In addition, Venezuela made the decision to withdraw its diplomatic staff from Chile, which regrettably left more than 600,000 Venezuelans resident in the country without the usual consular support. This state of affairs forced us to reflect on what has not been done effectively. While the region has shown remarkable commitment to supporting displaced Venezuela, the broader political objective, restoring democratic governance in Venezuela, remains elusive. Economic sanctions, including those led by the US, have not produced the desired effect. In fact, ongoing oil trade with Venezuela undermines the political leverage intended by these sanctions. Chile remains committed to institutional diplomatic efforts, both multilaterally and bilaterally. However, it is important to acknowledge that the result fell short of the successful solidarity and political change. I'm finishing.
You have 1 more minute, full minute, so
Great.
take advantage.
In the past, as was the case in Chile during the period of the dictatorship. In summary, it seems that the concept of solidarity has evolved in its form, while the state continues to adopt policies to provide proper protection to people fleeing their countries. The paradox remains that despite having more mechanisms of pressure and an international architecture designed to demand accountability, these efforts have not succeeded in restoring democracy. It is interesting to note that this is especially striking given the unprecedented openness many countries now have towards the world. Furthermore, the effort to promote respect for democracy can sometimes have unintended consequences for the countries leading these initiatives. Chile's experience offers an illuminating example of this. By maintaining its commitment to democratic principles, it has faced the unfortunate outcome of losing its diplomatic and consular representation in Venezuela. This has led to a certain degree of isolation from Venezuela, reminiscent of the approach often seen in more authoritarian regimes. This evolving reality challenges us to rethink how solidarity, diplomacy, and international pressure can be effectively wielded in the complex struggle for democracy in Latin America. Despite this, Chile will continue to insist through all institutional channels to contribute to the reestablishment of democracy in Venezuela. This is not a matter of political calculation, it is a matter of principle that are worth defending today and always. Thank you.
Bravo.
Gracias.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Tomás. Thank you so much. The next person in line will be Senator Juan José Matarí. So again, he will speak in Spanish. Those of you who don't understand Spanish, I recommend you use the headphones, the translation headphones. Y senador, querido senador Matarí, I'm also going to do my introduction to him in Spanish. Querido senador Matarí, bienvenido al panel. El senador Juan José Matarí es el presidente de la Comisión de Asuntos Iberoamericanos del Senado Español, que en este momento tiene una mayoría del principal partido opositor de España, que es el Partido Popular, percibido como centro-derecha en España. El gobierno de turno en España es una coalición de distintos partidos y alas del espectro político, pero con predominancia de la centro-izquierda, y han enfrentado tanto el gobierno como el Senado, que son firmes en su apoyo a la causa por la democracia de Venezuela, han enfrentado retos para expresar sin ambajes, con mucha claridad su apoyo a la gestión de los demócratas en Venezuela que luchan contra la dictadura de Nicolás Maduro. Y entonces el senador va a dar su testimonio de el reto que esto ha significado. Bienvenido, senador, y muchas gracias de antemano.
Muchas gracias a ti, Javier, por invitarme, y a HRF por tener la oportunidad de estar por segundo año en este importantísimo foro que es referente de la lucha por la libertad, la democracia y los derechos humanos en todo el mundo. Decías del Partido Popular, principal partido de la oposición. Está en la oposición, pero es el principal partido de España. El Partido Popular ganó las elecciones últimas generales en España con una mayoría insuficiente para poder formar gobierno, y sí tenemos una mayoría absoluta en la Cámara Segunda, en el Senado de España, ¿no? Para España, todo lo que pasa en Venezuela, como todo lo que pasa en Latinoamérica, como ustedes saben, pues es del máximo interés, ¿no? Y el Congreso y el Senado español son actores muy activos en la defensa de la democracia y de la libertad en toda Latinoamérica, y en este momento especialmente en Venezuela. Se han aprobado diversas resoluciones e iniciativas denunciando constantemente la violación reiterada de los derechos humanos y de las libertades y la persecución política en Venezuela. Y resoluciones muy importantes reconociendo la victoria electoral de la oposición liderada por María Corina Machado y reconocimiento de Edmundo González como presidente electo. Es verdad que esas resoluciones no contaron en ningún caso con el apoyo de los grupos políticos que forman parte del Gobierno de España en estos momentos, ¿no? La comisión que yo tengo el honor de presidir, como decía Javier, de Asuntos Iberoamericanos, de forma particular ha tenido el trabajo centrado en Venezuela durante los últimos meses. Yo diría que durante los últimos 2 años me acompaña el senador Íñigo Fernández y el letrado de la comisión también, y les doy la bienvenida y el agradecimiento por estar aquí también esta mañana. La última resolución, para que vean que no hemos dejado en ningún momento el tema de Venezuela, ha sido muy reciente, el 24 de abril. Pero yo recuerdo y quiero recordar con profunda emoción una sesión histórica que celebramos el 10 de junio del año pasado con la comparecencia online de María Corina Machado. Y en sus intervenciones, María Corina dijo 2 cosas muy claras. Pidió a la comunidad internacional y a los gobiernos europeos que hicieran mucho más de lo que se estaba haciendo. Y, en segundo lugar, que se elevara el costo del régimen a la represión y a la persecución política que se estaba produciendo y que se sigue produciendo cada día más en Venezuela. Por cierto, que esa comparecencia la organicé y la preparé con un hombre, Pedro Bruturcho, que sorpresivamente me lo he encontrado aquí en Oslo. Ha sido una satisfacción, como pueden imaginar, enorme poder conocerlo personalmente, poder abrazarle, porque hoy Pedro representa lo mejor de la política y lo mejor de Venezuela. Y estoy seguro que con personas como él, que se están jugando la vida cada día, Venezuela va a ser muy pronto libre, querido Pedro.
Bravo, Pedro.
Y es que bajo el liderazgo de María Corina Machado, los demócratas venezolanos se organizaron concienzudamente para derrotar a un régimen totalitario y criminal especializado en hacer fraudes electorales. Ganaron y además probaron esa victoria. Y con esa legitimidad, el pueblo venezolano, los venezolanos, han pedido a todo el mundo que hagan su parte, partiendo desde lo más básico del reconocimiento de Edmundo González como presidente electo, reconociendo el triunfo de la oposición, hasta otra cosa que es muy importante, el bloqueo de las redes de financiamiento ilícito que el régimen de Maduro mantiene en múltiples países, de ellos también en Europa. Hay que cortar todos esos flujos financieros posibles que sostienen la represión y la corrupción en Venezuela. Lo explicaba muy bien el lunes pasado, como siempre brillantemente, Leo López, ¿no? Quiero decirles también que si las democracias del mundo, especialmente las europeas, permiten que se consolide el régimen, Venezuela se consolidará también como cabeza de playa para la peor injerencia de las dictaduras en el corazón de Occidente. Sin duda, Nicolás Maduro es una amenaza directa para la seguridad de todo el hemisferio occidental. De ahí la gran importancia y la gran relevancia que han cobrado 2 últimas acciones que hemos conocido, lo que es la revocación de la licencia de Chevron para operar en Venezuela y también la operación de rescate de los rehenes de la Embajada Argentina. Pero se requiere algo más, se requiere la colaboración de todas las democracias en la penalización de los violadores de derechos humanos en Venezuela y el desmontaje, como decía, de esos sistemas de financiamiento, así como otras medidas enfocadas a fortalecer la presión sobre el régimen y facilitar su salida del poder, tal y como pedía María Corina en esa comparecencia en el Senado. Por eso es muy importante, y yo siempre destaco en España la posición y lo que ha hecho el gobierno del presidente Boric, al que debemos de estar agradecidos, ¿no? Porque no hay que distinguir efectivamente entre democracias de un signo o de otro, entre dictaduras de un signo o de otro. Al final una dictadura es una dictadura, tenga un signo ideológico de derecha o de izquierda. Una Venezuela libre, además, puede aportar mucho mayor oferta energética en Occidente de la que podría aportar cualquier otro país en el mundo, y por tanto eso es crucial en un mundo como el actual, en el que la transición energética se está produciendo. Y muy importante y definitivo, la lucha por la libertad y la democracia en Venezuela es la lucha por la libertad y la democracia en toda Latinoamérica y en todo el hemisferio occidental. Y la pregunta que debemos hacernos, querido Javier, es si la comunidad internacional, como decía, ha hecho todo lo que podía hacer. Si los demócratas hemos dado una respuesta a la altura de lo que esperaban y sin duda merecían los seres venezolanos que el 28 de julio del año pasado vencieron fehacientemente en unas elecciones que, por cierto, no fueron libres ni mucho menos. Y la respuesta, lamentablemente, es no. No, y por eso Nicolás Maduro, el 10 de enero, consumó su golpe de Estado y usurpó el poder de manera ilegítima. Y ahora hay que volver a preguntarse cada día si la comunidad internacional está haciendo todo lo posible para impedir que el régimen consolide la dictadura en Venezuela. Y yo creo que la comunidad internacional tiene todavía pendiente una reacción a la altura del desafío y del crimen continuado que se está perpetrando en Venezuela cada día. Cada día conocemos nuevas noticias y nuevos datos que demuestran los crímenes de lesa humanidad en Venezuela que merecen, sin duda, el castigo de la Corte Penal Internacional. Tenemos una obligación, y es no abandonar a su suerte al bravo pueblo venezolano, liderado por esa heroína del siglo XXI, muy a pesar suyo, que es María Corina Machado, y estar aquí al lado de su hija compartiendo este panel es también un absoluto privilegio. Muchas gracias, Ana, y muchos besos a tu madre cuando tengas la ocasión, que no sabemos cuándo será, de volver a verla otra vez, ¿no? Bueno, pues un pueblo venezolano hundido en la miseria y que hoy es una gigantesca prisión. Por cierto, aprovecho para exigir una vez más la liberación de todos los presos políticos en Venezuela, la liberación de los presos españoles y, muy singularmente, la liberación de Rocío San Miguel, ciudadana venezolana y española. No podemos desistir, no podemos enmudecer. Tenemos que levantar la voz y seguir denunciando la situación en todos los foros posibles y en los parlamentos democráticos. Hoy lo hacemos aquí en Oslo, en este foro tan importante, y nosotros lo vamos a seguir haciendo en el Congreso y en el Senado de España. Porque tenemos que atender las demandas de auxilio de Venezuela y de cada venezolano que nos han demostrado y que nos demuestran cada día que Venezuela no se rinde, que conservan la esperanza de que se mantienen unidos para hacer valer esa victoria del pasado 28 de julio bajo el liderazgo de María Corina Machado. Y lo hemos vuelto a ver muy recientemente, el pasado domingo, con esa farsa electoral pretendida por Maduro, y este domingo ha vuelto el pueblo venezolano a responder a esa llamada, en este caso de no participación, de María Corina Machado. Y termino, querido Javier. No cabe, por tanto, el apaciguamiento ni la resignación, porque, como ha dicho un compañero de Pedro, Omar González, uno de los rehenes rescatados de la embajada argentina, esa operación de rescate fue un rugido al mundo. El régimen de Maduro está herido de muerte. La operación demostró que el régimen es frágil, que su dominio se tambalea y que su hora final se acerca. Este es un mensaje de esperanza que debemos de compartir los demócratas, pero que también tenemos una obligación de hacerlo posible con nuestro trabajo cada día. Y termino. Ahora más que nunca, la obligación de los demócratas es apoyar una Venezuela que, en palabras de María Corina en esa comparecencia que he dicho en el Senado de España, una Venezuela que sostiene una lucha una lucha ética por la verdad, una lucha existencial por la vida y una lucha espiritual por el bien. ¡Viva Venezuela libre!
Muchísimas gracias, senador, por su excelente intervención. So I'm going to switch back to English to introduce the third panelist, Héctor Schamis. Professor Schamis is a public intellectual in Latin America. He's a professor of democracy at Georgetown University, and he's had the privilege of being a very, very close advisor, perhaps the closest advisor to the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, former Secretary General. He left his post a couple of days ago, but he was at HRF with tracked the enforcement of the Inter-American Democratic Charter since our inception as an organization in 2005, and we can say very clearly that he has been the most principled and clear Secretary General of the OAS so far, and by clear I mean showing very clear positions against dictatorships, which is what the OAS Charter Article 9 and the Inter-American Democratic Charter in general calls for. So it's been very anti-authoritarian regimes, anti-dictatorship, and very clear in this case, exposing the crimes against humanity, providing a platform within the OAS to expose the crimes of the Maduro dictatorship. And Héctor has been behind this effort very strongly and courageously, and so he's here to share with us the challenge of doing this at the OAS. Thank you, Héctor.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you.
The mic is now.
Do I have a mic?
If not,
Silence.
keep
hello.
trying to. Otherwise, we can use the handheld device. There you go. This could work.
There we go.
Thank you.
Now I need a third hand. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Human Rights Foundation, for inviting me, for doing this. Thank you, Javier. I'm glad to be. I'm glad to be here with good friends, with some friends I haven't met until today, like Ana Corina, but we corresponded for quite some time. Thank you, Senator Tomás. A pleasure to be here with you. Let me start. Javier asked me to do so many things. I don't know how to do all this. But, well...
You're already 15 seconds in. Huh?
No, but I'm going to steal from... They ended before their 6 minutes, so I'm going to borrow from them. I'm going to take that. No, let me start by... I was particularly moved by Tomás's presentation and the way he framed the question of international solidarity, using his own country, Chile, as an example, as a case study of a dramatically important episode of international solidarity at the time. And especially being in Scandinavia, to say that is a tribute. I mean, it's a tribute to a part of the world that has been the champion, both Norway and Sweden, of international solidarity with Chile at the time. I happen to be related to some people involved in that, and it was quite exemplary. And it's also interesting to draw the contrast because, let's face it, it hasn't been the same way regarding Venezuela. For a variety of reasons, international solidarity today is à la carte. And you pick and choose who are you solidario with and who you're not. And a couple of things explain why there's been so much pick and choose with Venezuela. Javier emphasized throughout, and I think he's right, the importance of President Boric as self-defined as a socialist and a vocal, principled politician, leader of the region regarding the Venezuelan dictatorship. And that's extremely important. It is true that we should drop ideology when we assess, when we read and interpret this regime. This is not about ideology. And we're playing the book, the dictatorship book, when we talk about ideology. We're just falling into their own, quite smart trap. This is a criminal organization with an exposed rationalization in the form of ideology. There was a vehicle to corrupt governments around the world, in Latin America for sure, but not only in Latin America, in Europe. There is campaign financing in Spain, Podemos, and there's been campaign finance in Italy, Cinque Stelle, which receive Bolivarian funds for election campaign. This is a criminal organization that is entrenched in power. The best metaphor I have is Dog Day Afternoon, the movie, Tarde de Perros. I was talking to Pedro Mario yesterday about this, and this is what it is. It's a country run by criminals, a transnational criminal organization with a totalitarian exercise of power. And that needs to be highlighted, of course. And with Venezuelans as hostages inside or hostages outside, unable to go back, unable to meet their families and friends again. That's partly a reason why this forum is so important, to highlight these things and to exercise, to put in practice solidarity, period. Now, what has happened now? Well, a series of things that I want to highlight. This election has been a new chapter, signals a new chapter in Venezuelan history. The political process is no longer what it used to be. The election was fraud, which happened in the past, except that now it was proved. It was reviewed, it was audited, and it's shown the results. I had the tally sheets in my hands. And then that gives you an idea that the tally sheets are there, exist. Everybody can have access to it. They're posted online, moreover. That demonstrates not only that there's been fraud, which we knew it happened before, but we never knew the magnitude, the mechanics, the methodology used for electoral fraud. And now it was demonstrated. This is unprecedented. It is as important as the mobilization that preceded the voting day. And this is a new form of, it should instill a new form of solidarity. Simple, you know, to make the vote count, to have a clean election, free and fair and transparent. And this is, you know, something for the international community to never forget, never let go. Now, another thing that Javier asked me is to reflect a little bit about the OAS on all these processes. Well, two things. Regarding the election, we had, I don't remember how many, but 3, 4, 5 permanent council meetings on the Venezuelan election and fraud and et cetera, with international observers. The Ibero-American Commission of Human Rights, in one of those permanent council meetings, used...
Is it a microphone? Sorry about that.
Yeah, now a fourth hand.
Exactly. Octopus, an octopus.
An octopus. Yeah. Is this, no.
Wait. No.
Hello, yeah, okay. They used for the first time in the Venezuelan repression process in the Venezuelan authoritarian period, they use the term state terrorism, terrorismo de Estado, and that is fundamental. It's not just that there's been repression, it's not just that there's been torture and crimes against humanity. I want to say something about crimes against humanity. We had something to do with the whole crimes against humanity charges in The Hague. We at the OAS with Secretary Almagro. But to use the terms terrorismo de Estado, state terrorism, is also unprecedented. It happened 2-3 weeks after the election in one of the meetings. The OAS has not observed because the OAS is banned from entering Venezuela, not by Maduro's decision, but by Chavez's decision, which means that it's carved in stone. You know, as long as the Chavista government is in office, the OAS will not enter Venezuela. It's, you know, in the scriptures of Hugo Chavez. Now, the Carter Center observed, and they did a very good job. The UN observed and did a good job, not as good as the Carter Center. And the OAS, DECO, Department of Electoral Observation and Cooperation, did a long-distance review and audit of the votes and certified and concurred with the European, well, the European Union was there as well, not a large mission, but with the UN and especially with the Carter Center, which did a fabulous job. Interestingly enough, why did they allow the Carter Center? Well, that's because of the memories of the 2004 election. But they thought that the Carter Center would make a mistake again. Well, not this time. Anyway, now the former Secretary General, as Idania Chirinos has said, the Secretario General Vitalicio, she called him, and international solidarity in the office of the Secretary General. I go around the room and I see faces, Pedro, Leopoldo, Pedro Mario, Alejandra, Carla, I don't want to mention anybody else, the Lopez family. Who hasn't been at the office of the SG at the OAS? Who hasn't been there talking and getting the picture and the tweet by Luis Almagro on international solidarity with Venezuela? And that's what we've done. I mean, I joined him, you know, he invited me, remember in 2016, 17, come work with me. Yes, I mean, we met in Mexico and in a conference on democracy in Latin America. And ever since, Venezuela has been a daily conversation with him at his office or wherever, in and out, throughout, pandemic or no pandemic, via Zoom on the phone, or in the office. In Cucuta, what do I have? 1 minute. In Cucuta, in Bogota,
we can continue after that, but yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Héctor. And
no, one more thing.
Yeah, finish.
No, the last thing is, well, when we did run the hearings at the OAS on crimes against humanity, all of these people I mentioned were there one way or another. And we wrote a first report. By now there are 4 or 5 reports of the panel of experts. We wrote a first report, 400 pages, that the SG submitted to the International Criminal Court. That opened the case, and 6 countries of the Americas petitioned an investigation into the Maduro regime using our 400-page report as supporting material. Chile wasn't there at the time, but it joined recently. And now it's 6 still, because 1 got out, 1 got in. But that is a very active form of solidarity that we have to insist. We requested the prosecutor to issue arrest warrants against Maduro and the 14 members of the top clique, and we're still waiting. But we need to continue exercising that pressure and hoping for the best. I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Héctor. No worries. Amazing. Thank you so much. And please, microphone. Please relay our thanks to Secretary General Almagro too.
Yes.
Okay, I know that he's back in Uruguay trying to rest a little bit as he decides on next steps, but please do relay that thanks on behalf of this community that you have mentioned. Thank you. Next is the daughter of the hero of Venezuela, as Senator Matarí said it. When someone is a leader of a country and puts herself on the line in order to defeat a dictatorship, like María Corina has done, they do it with a lot of courage, but it's not their intention to be arrested. It's not their intention to have to go in hiding. That's something that comes sometimes with the territory when you're so courageous and you're facing such a horrendous regime as your mom is. And obviously you have also shown that courage, that resilience as a key member of that family. And so we're grateful for you for remaining positive and attending these type of events to share your experience with the rest of us. So welcome, Ana Corina, and please tell us how, from your perspective, your family's perspective, your movement's perspective, the issue of democratic solidarity has appeared. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start just with a brief introduction. That's okay. First and foremost, thank you to the Oslo Freedom Forum and the Human Rights Foundation for inviting me and having us all here and dedicating this time to a very important topic. Look, Javier, I'm part of a generation that was born in a country with one of the strongest and most stable democracies in Latin America. We were envied for our energy sector. We had the biggest oil reserves in the world. Our academic institutions were admired across our hemisphere, and we opened the door to millions of people from across the globe that were searching for a better life, including and especially Latin Americans. But I did not grow up in that Venezuela. I grew up in a country where corruption and repression took hold under the Chavista regime. Our institutions crumbled. The media became increasingly controlled by an authoritarian regime, and our private sector collapsed. And this caused the forced migration of over a third of the population. That's 9 million people, 9 million Venezuelans, millions of families forced apart. Now, my mother, María Corina Machado, the leader of the opposition and democratic movement, she never intended to be a politician. She studied engineering and wanted to follow into my grandfather's footsteps in the steel industry. But when Venezuela fell into the deep crisis under an increasingly authoritarian Hugo Chavez, she felt compelled to act. And she did so not out of personal ambition, but out of a commitment to human dignity, freedom, and justice. And she has dedicated her life to this fight. And for this fight for freedom, she's been called crazy, extremist, radical. She's been accused of terrorism and treason, threatened to decades of imprisonment, risked her life multiple times. She's been persecuted, brutally assaulted, kidnapped. She's been barred from leaving Venezuela for more than 11 years. And anyone who works alongside her is thrown into jail or worse. Whoever dares to help her or her team throughout their journeys across Venezuela faces imminent closure of their small businesses just for feeding them or providing shelter. Today, my mother has been in hiding in Venezuela in complete isolation for more than 10 months with constant threats to her life. Now, I don't know where my mother is today or when I'll see her again. And as for me, well, like many in this room, I was forced to leave my country about 13 years ago, separated from my family, my loved ones, my friends, my beloved grandparents. And since then, I've tried to build a life abroad and live through that duality of, building your own path and while our hearts and minds remain in our home countries. So I paved my way into the private sector, and I actually now live in New York City, and I work in a data intelligence software company full-time. But first and foremost, I am a Venezuelan, and I am part of a generation that cannot afford to look the other way. And that is why, as many other thousands of Venezuelans, has had no other choice but to rise to the occasion and to do whatever it is in our power to denounce what is happening in our country, Venezuela, and to continue my mother's fight, to use my voice for those who can't, and to take advantage of every platform we're giving, such as this one, to call for a free Venezuela. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you, Ana Corina, again. And so let me start a round of questions for the panelists with you. What can the international community, what can leaders of democratic countries, whether in the opposition like Senator Matarí, or in office like Ambassador Pascual, what can democratic governments, international organizations, the successors of Secretary General Almagro and Héctor at the OAS, at the UN, Nordic countries, what can Democrats, small d Democrats, do in support of the Venezuelan cause at this moment?
Oh, thank you for that question. Well, I would say three major things. But first and foremost is unequivocally recognizing the electoral outcome of July 28th presidential elections, and recognizing and calling out Edmundo González Urrutia as our rightful president, and clearly calling out Maduro and his regime for what they are: a dictatorship, criminals, and usurpers. That's the first thing, very clear. And I will thank the Latin American countries that have done so. Argentina, Ecuador, Uruguay, Dominican Republic, Panama, Peru, Guatemala, that took that clear position and recognized Edmundo González Urrutia as their president. And I want to call out also President Boric, because that is, as the ambassador described, it is not a matter of political ideology. It is a matter of morality, of defense for democracy, of sovereignty of nations. And I will thank President Boric and his government for calling out Maduro for what he is, a dictator, and for saying that the results issued or published by the National Electoral Council are not a reflection of the truth and not of the Venezuelan people's will. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a multilateral approach focused on law enforcement in two areas. First is the coordination of international criminal courts and democratic governments in unequivocally and urgently denouncing the human rights violations and crimes against humanity. In Venezuela today, there's more than 922 political prisoners and counting. That includes adolescents, pregnant women, elderly citizens, people with disabilities, all innocent. And we cannot and must not rest until the last person is released. Second, in that space is dismantling, or working together to dismantle the illicit transnational financial system that holds the regime in power. And that not only includes oil, it includes gold mining, human trafficking, and the support for transnational criminal organizations like the Tren de Aragua. It's very important. This is what funds the repressive machinery that the government used to suppress its people and remain in power. And that this money that flows into Venezuela, as was said yesterday, does not end in benefiting the Venezuelan people. It ends in the cronies' pockets. And then third, I would say, is tackling the migration crisis with humanity and solidarity. And I think there's three areas there. I think one is a mindset change, understanding that without a regime change, the migration flow will not stop. When there's an economic and social crisis, the families will do everything in their power to protect their children. The flow of migration will not stop with Maduro regime in power. That's first and foremost. Second is, well, for especially Latin American countries that we understand have received one of the biggest flows of Venezuelan migrants, especially in these last 10 years, is tackling the humanitarian crises that these people face. They do not choose to be there. They do so for necessity, and they often face very dire conditions. So that's the first thing I would ask them to do. And then second is understanding that migration, if managed properly, can have and will have positive benefits to the local economy. And they can use examples that have proved successful recently. No, you don't have to look that far away. I mean, President Duque in Colombia was an example where they provided channels for the Venezuelan migrants to have a way to contribute to the economy formally, work, and pay taxes. So that's what I'd say on that front.
Very eloquently put. The side of solidarity is not just governments issuing public pronouncements in favor of the Democrats in Venezuela and against the dictatorship, but it's also creating public policies that are going to welcome the migrants in a more cohesive and coherent way. Let me ask Tomás, and I wanted you to share. I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, so I hope you can answer it. I know that Tomás and Senator Matarí are very diplomatic, and Tomás is actually an ambassador. So, but courage is something that we get a little bit instinctively. It's part of like resistance to authoritarianism, to abuse, to injustice, right? So we have an instinct for courage, but in some contexts, it can be also counterintuitive. We also have an instinct for echo chambers, for tribalism within sides, and I know that having done what your government has done in Chile, considering that there are members of that coalition that are the Communist Party of Chile, it hasn't been easy. So if you could share at least one challenge in how he has and your government has navigated the difficulty of being very clear despite perhaps some internal pressure within folks that are members of that coalition to still remain principled. The reason I asked that, again, courage is also learned, and knowing how he was able to navigate that, I think is something that we can take away. Some members here in this audience are going to be members of democratic governments, hopefully democratic governments in the future, and they can learn perhaps a little bit from that. So you could share something, Tomás, on that.
It's a tough question because it's also to speak about some internal things, no, which always is
Off the record, and it's being recorded. It will be
Chatham
YouTube tomorrow.
Chatham House rules here. No, being honest, I think it's helped that the generation of President Boric. President Boric is we were classmates at the university, so we are in the Faculty of Law of Universidad de Chile. We both have one teacher, a master of human rights, José Salaquet, which is one of the brightest, academic and also a human rights defender in Latin America and also in the Pinochet dictatorship. And I think this helps in order to embrace, the idea that human rights must be, defending always and no matter where, no matter what happened. So, in particular, President Boric has, from his past as parliamentary, but also as a student, I would say that he has a strong, commitment and principle with human rights principles, and he has demonstrated that in office, which is always complex, considering the variety of the different approach that the coalition has, because you need to try to provide a kind of, I don't know how to say in English, but gobernabilidad, maybe to try to incorporate governance, thank you, different approach, and I don't know, at least in my case, I'm not near from the president, but
You're probably talking to the president.
No. my boss talked to the president. I don't know, well, classmate. We were 400, so yeah. But that's the idea that I would say that there is a strong commitment, and all the people around know that. So at least in the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we have not a feeling or we have not felt I don't know, a pressure on what we have been our policy on the Human Rights Council, and also on this matter, but also in other matters like Nicaragua, but also other complex matters in Chile, like Gaza, Ukraine. Chile is the only country that has sent a file to the ICC on Gaza and also on Ukraine in the world. So that's tried to show you that there's not a political calculation on what we are trying to do, but to a real commitment with international law, considering that we are a small country and the only protection that we have is the international law. So that's the idea. At least I see that has the president and the people who work on the government, but also as a state policy, trying to do during this period with the situation in Venezuela, but also with other situation in Chile.
Amazing. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for sharing that. We have 6 minutes, so I'd like to open it up to the public to ask questions, specifically for Senator Matarí, one question, and also one question for Héctor. If someone has a question for Senator Matarí or for Héctor, so Lobsang for whom? For Héctor. So we'll start with the Lobsang question, and then for Senator Matarí, Enrique. Okay. So Lobsang, let me hand you the microphone. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, no. When Senator Matarí's answer happens, remember the headphones.
My question, generally, especially to you, because you're in Georgetown, the Maduro is still in power because of money and arms, and both are supplied by China. You buy oil from, Venezuela and supply arms to Maduro. So China is not mentioned, Without China, Maduro won't be there. So maybe, Chile could, good thing, you're voting for Venezuela, but you could also vote for Uyghur issues and other human rights council as well.
Thank you, Lobsan. Appreciate it. Thank you.
What's the question?
China.
China, what about China?
Supporting Maduro and keeping him in power by buying his oil and supplying arms, and how you deal with China.
How you deal with any foreign power that has an interest in Maduro staying in power? And Cuba wasn't mentioned either, for that matter, which is much closer and has an intelligence role, very specific intelligence role. The airport security, the voting registry is in the hands of the Cubans. China has provided financing, agree, granted. It's a question of, in terms of the international chessboard, where do you start? Well, there is also Hezbollah and therefore Iranian interest in Venezuela. There are hundreds of Hezbollah operatives with Venezuelan passports in the world. How is Hezbollah the main cause, the main factor?
China is the largest buyer of Venezuelan oil.
Well, that since this is a conference heavily focused on sanctions, I learned yesterday that much of that oil is traded through Hong Kong these days, because Hong Kong has lost autonomy and doesn't have financial autonomy as it continues claiming to have, and Beijing exercises control, and much of that oil goes through Hong Kong, as much as Russia evades Western sanctions through Hong Kong, for example. The question is, I think, personally, cutting ties with China would perhaps make Maduro fall. Perhaps, I think. Now, cutting ties with Cuba will certainly collapse Maduro in a second. And so you choose, and what's your priority? I think it would be far more useful to cut ties with Cuba and Maduro would fall. And the rest will be a domino effect, because the peculiarity of these regimes is that they have exported authoritarian methods and policies and corruption and crime throughout the Americas. Thank you.
Thank you, Héctor. Enrique, question, the microphone, question for Senator Matarí. This is going to be in Spanish for folks that need translation.
You stole my
En español para el senador Matarí.
Sí, no, me robaron la pregunta. Es exactamente la misma pregunta con China, pero con Cuba. Pero es un caso...
Pero hablemos de Cuba, sí,
Exacto,
hablemos de Cuba.
Mi pregunta es, ¿qué pasa con Cuba? Porque Cuba están considerando tomar a Cuba en el mismo caso exactamente que Venezuela, porque debe haber una conciencia de que sin Cuba no hubiera Venezuela. O sea, sin la dictadura cubana no hubiera una dictadura venezolana. Y entonces yo creo que, porque yo sé, sí, me consta que Cuba está en un lugar diferente que Venezuela de alguna manera. A pesar de que Cuba ni siquiera tiene elecciones robadas, ni siquiera ha llegado a ese punto, ni siquiera reconoce ningún otro partido que el Partido Comunista. Si la pregunta es, ¿hay planes de poner a Cuba en el mismo sitio que Venezuela, en esa solidaridad que tanto requerimos?
Excelente. Bravo. Excelente. Senador.
Evidentemente, no se oye.
Microphone for
sí.
Senator Matarí.
Sí. Tiene que estar en el mismo plano. Lo que no podemos permitir es que Venezuela sea en muy poco tiempo. Yo creo que ya lo es una segunda Cuba. Es verdad que el transcurso del tiempo en Cuba, y partiendo de que durante muchos años pues se ha visto con simpatía en países democráticos, por gran parte, lamentablemente hay que decirlo, de la izquierda, a Cuba, pues hemos llegado donde hemos llegado. Nosotros, desde luego, en nuestro trabajo como parlamentarios en el Senado de España, en el Congreso, mantenemos la misma posición y mantenemos la misma presión sobre Cuba. Pero es verdad que en la actualidad, pues la atención está mucho más centrada en Venezuela. Pero, como he dicho en mi intervención, no permitamos que se consolide la dictadura en Venezuela, porque es la segunda Cuba, y una Cuba yo creo todavía mucho peor, porque las posibilidades que tiene Venezuela con esas, como comentaba Ana Corina, con esas riquezas tan inmensas que tiene, esas posibilidades, yo creo que sería mucho más peligroso todavía para el conjunto de Occidente. No podemos olvidar Cuba, aunque sigamos permanentemente día a día con el tema de Venezuela, no podemos olvidar Nicaragua, tenemos que estar atentos a Bolivia, tenemos que estar atentos a la deriva
El Salvador.
autoritaria en cualquier país que se produzca, porque como decía Tomás muy bien, ¿no? La solidaridad de la que hablaba también el representante del gobierno chileno no puede ser a la carta. Los partidos de izquierda y centroizquierda, de izquierda moderada, de izquierda no populista y los partidos de derecha, de centro derecha, derecha no populista, no extrema, no podemos distinguir las dictaduras sean de un signo o sean de otro. Nuestra responsabilidad como demócratas es a todas atacarlas por igual y trabajar para que esos regímenes pues desaparezcan del mundo cuanto antes.
Bravo. Bravo. We'll hand it to Héctor very quickly for something he wants to add on this.
No, just the
Wait.
Europeans have trouble with Cuba, basically because of the existence of the political dialogue and cooperation agreement, behind which the Cuban regime is constantly hidden. And until that cooperation agreement is eliminated, that's going to be a different treatment for sure, unfortunately.
Thank you. And with those parting thoughts, just to remind you something, one of the things that we do at the Oslo Freedom Forum is that we on purpose have very large coffee breaks. So we have a 30-minute coffee break coming up now. And please talk to our panelists. This is your opportunity to actually get off the record stuff from all of them, okay? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.